Welcome to the Mike Litton Experience podcast. Mike has over 31 years experience in real estate, finance, and investing. He's passionate about being a father, a teacher, a realtor, an investor, and a leader. Everyone has a story, and our passion is to help them tell it. And now, introducing the host of the Mike Litton Experience, Mike Litton.
So what can you expect from the Mike Litton Experience? You can expect stories that will inspire, motivate, advice that will sharpen your focus, and expert information on real estate, finance, and market conditions. Mark Podolsky, thank you so much for being our guest on the Mike Litton Experience. I'm super excited for our time together. And like we talked about before we hit record, everybody has a story, and our passion is to help them tell it. So with your permission, we're going to start with where you were born, go all the way up to today. And then we want to talk about these amazing things you're doing in terms of turning land into passive income. It's something I've never heard of before, and I'm super excited to find out how it is you go about doing it. I also want to talk about your books and your podcast, all the stuff that you're doing, because you're adding a lot of value to investors. So appreciate you being here, bud.
Mike Litton, thank you so much for having me. This is going to be an amazing experience.
Yeah, we're going to have a great time. So where were you born?
So I'm born in the show me state of Missouri.
Missouri,
St. Louis,
I love it.
Missouri, yeah.
Did you grow up there?
I grew up there, and I had a pretty idyllic childhood. At least that's what I told my therapist.
Yeah.
My parents are still married after 60 years.
Wow.
And
for them.
Unfortunately, I lost my older sister to COVID in 2020.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, thank you. And but yeah, I mean, I had a pretty traditional Midwestern childhood in the 70s. My parents didn't know where I was half the time. You know, the parents would scream out, "Time for dinner."
Dinner's ready, right?
We'd all go scurrying in
Yep.
and do that. My dad was a wholesale grocer, and he worked with his dad. So there's entrepreneurship already in my family.
Yeah.
My mom was a legal secretary, and yeah, I mean, I'm very close to my parents. I still talk to them every day.
Oh, that's
I'm
cool.
kind of obsessed with death, Mike. In a
Oh,
sense, like, but not in a morbid way, in a way that's like, this could be the last time I hear their voice,
yeah.
right? And so I'm always thinking like the last time of anything,
Yeah.
and trying to be really super hyper aware of just being grateful for those moments. And so I'll call my parents pretty much every day just
That's
to hear their
awesome, man.
voice.
That's
And
awesome. Good for you.
connect.
Good for you. It's
Yeah.
amazing how life teaches us to be that way, from different events in life and different things that happen. It's part of why we do this podcast, because we want people's life stories, right? And we want people to learn from the mistakes we've made. We want people to learn from the successes we've had. We want them to learn from other people's experience. And so it's kind of cool. So let me ask you this. Growing up in Missouri, what was your favorite thing about growing up there?
I think the community.
Yeah.
There's a sense, like, I live in Scottsdale, Arizona now,
Yeah.
and it's beautiful every day. And people are in the backyard, and their pools, and they're transient. It gets hot and they move. But growing up in St. Louis, I had the same neighbors, I had the same friends. A lot of my high school friends are still there. They have this sense of community. We're all in it together. When the weather's bad, everyone's suffering. That Midwestern friendliness is there because, like, you need to depend on your neighbor.
Yep.
Where out here, it's nice. People figure it out. You're more independent.
You're leaning on each other back there.
You're leaning on each other. So I think that's what I love the most.
So growing up, who was the most influential person to you?
I think my dad
Yeah.
was the most influential person. He was a really hard worker, almost a workaholic. 7 a.m., he'd be up, getting ready for work, reading the newspaper, heading out.
Yeah.
And then he'd work all day. He'd come home, have dinner, and he'd do more work until 9 o'clock.
Yeah.
So I saw a lot of work, to the point where I think I went the other way, and I became ambitiously lazy. And I thought, there might be a better way with this work thing, where you don't have to grind and grind and grind. and still provide.
Isn't it amazing as we grow up, the people that have influence on us? And it's, it can go either way, right? As a parent, you want your kids to have a better life than you had growing up, right? And, we were just talking about that this morning at a meeting I was at with another guy that's a dad, and he's a good friend of mine, and we're getting into business together. And we were talking about our kids and how we grew up and how we wanted to make sure that our kids had it way better than the way we had it. Not that it was bad. I mean, we both had great childhoods and that kind of thing, but you're just always trying to protect them, and you're always trying to give them something better. It's amazing. It's amazing how that affects you. So that's cool, man. So in high school, did you have a favorite subject?
History. I
Yeah.
loved history. I loved biographies, histories, the stories, how the past sort of kind of you can connect the future, and we're always sort of repeating the same mistakes, and you see these trends and these patterns. I really enjoyed history.
Yeah. A very wise man once said, if you ignore history, you're bound to repeat it, So yeah, it's a big deal. So after high school, where did you go?
I went to Indiana University. I'm a Hoosier.
Ooh, they just played Ohio State the other day. They
Yeah,
lost, but they
they
played Ohio
lost.
State the other day.
Yeah, but they
They've got
did beat
quite a team
Purdue.
this year.
It's incredible. Yeah, I use a football school now.
Yeah, Kurt Signetti has really turned that thing around. And they were,
Yeah.
when he came there, they asked him, they said, "So who are you?" And he goes, "Google me, I win."
Yeah, yeah. I love his confidence.
Yeah, me too. Me too.
Yeah.
So what'd you study at Indiana?
So I studied history and English.
Yeah.
So I can read and I can write.
There you go. What was your
Yeah.
favorite thing about going to school there?
I think my favorite thing about going to school there was the friendships.
Yeah.
There's something about those college friendships, and I still have them.
Yeah.
And it's like army buddies in a way. Like you're going through this experience together, and it forges these deep bonds that last. So, do I remember the classes? No. But do I remember the crazy parties? Not really. But I can pick up my phone. We have guys trips every year, and those bonds are still there.
Yeah. It's kind of like the neighbors in St. Louis when the weather's bad.
Yeah.
Right? You're sort of in that deal together. You're away from home, right? You might have a bout of bit of homesickness, that kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
Pardon me. And you all band together. I apologize. Pardon me.
Yeah. I'm so grateful that I grew up in a time when we didn't have smartphones.
Yeah.
Because you'd meet people because you had to meet somebody.
Yeah.
You couldn't escape. And I think that's a bit lost today.
It is. It is.
And
We have an ongoing conversation on this podcast about what people think a conversation is today, right? And young people seem to think that a conversation is, I'm talking to you and you're trying to figure out what you're going to say next. When really what a conversation is I'm talking to you, you're listening, and then you're potentially going to ask me a question about what I just said, right? For clarification or whatever. And the first example that young people think is a conversation is actually a debate. It's not a conversation. And so one of the ongoing sort of threads in this podcast, your episode 252, is the way people communicate and sort of the power of questions. It's something that we're actually going to be writing a book about, believe it or not. So
I love that. Wait, Mike, can I just ask you, what is your favorite question?
I have a lot of them.
And then let's just say icebreaker question. You're on the plane, you're sitting next to somebody. What's your icebreaker question? Or networking conference?
So when I'm sitting on a plane and I'm headed to wherever, right? My icebreaker is, so are you going somewhere on business? Are you from here? Right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then we get into a conversation. I had a conversation with a guy that was deadheading one time to Austin, Texas. He's a corporate pilot. And to be honest with you, he looked like a surfer, right? And he's like sitting there and, and he's in the seat, not next to me, but in the window seat. And I was in the aisle seat and nobody in between us. And I struck up a conversation with him. We started talking. Turned out he was a surfer, does surf, right? And in high school, he would surf in Mexico. And he ended up finding out that he could get his pilot's license and he could fly people down there for the day, and from the US, fly them down there for the day, go surf, and then fly them back. And it became a deal, right? Well, as he got older and he got, had kids, got married, had kids, all this stuff, he had to get more stable, but he still wanted to fly. So he was now a corporate pilot that flew charters, right? And so we're going through all this, and I said, "So who are you picking up in Austin, Texas?" And he goes, "Well, I'm picking up some guys that are in the mortgage business. In fact, I bet you know them." And he pulls out this, I'm not joking, he pulls out this form and he tells me who it is. Turns out it's a guy I worked with 30 years ago in the mortgage business. No joke. Actually, 32 years ago. Yeah. It's
Okay,
like,
time is a pretzel.
what a small world we live in, buddy. But
Yeah,
yeah, what I love to do is exactly what we're doing right now. I love to get people's stories. I love to find out where they came from and how they ended up where they are, right?
yeah,
Because it's fascinating to me. And for him, he never even thought about being a pilot, but being a pilot allowed him to fly people down to Mexico, and he got to go surf with them. And some of them he taught how to surf, and that kind of thing. And then he'd get on a plane in the evening and come home. And he thought that was the coolest gig ever, and somebody
yeah,
paid him to do it. It's like crazy.
yeah, yeah. It's amazing. I mean, I think that curiosity like that is going to become this scarce and valuable resource because when I
Yeah.
have the totality of human knowledge and entertainment in the palm of my hand,
Yeah.
this surfer, by comparison, you juxtapose it, isn't as interesting.
Yeah.
And yet, this incredible story wouldn't have been come alive if
Yeah.
not for you asking the question.
Yeah. Well, you never know what you're going to get,
Yeah,
right? You never know. I mean, I literally have never met a stranger, I don't think. And that's sort of the running theme with my family is they know that I'm the guy that's always going to introduce myself and meet people. I met an actress from Days of Our Lives one time, at the Schubert Theater in Los Angeles. We were going to Cats, and we just happened to be standing in the lobby. And my mother watched Days of Our Lives every day for like 30 years. Okay. She'd tape it every day. And so she'd come home after work and she'd watch her daily soap opera. Right. And this gal was the main character in it. And she happened to be standing waiting for her husband at intermission. And so I walked up to her and introduced myself, and we started talking. Turns out I'm from Oklahoma. She has family from Oklahoma, the whole deal, right? I mean, it was wild. So it's fun. It's something that I do a lot. And I don't think it annoys people, but it might, right? But it's always fun. It's
I
always
think
fun to
it's
get
the generation, maybe the
it's
young
always fun to
generation.
get their story,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
and find out where they're from. And the thing is, as much as people are stuck in their phones, as much as people are focused on what they're focused on, they're literally, Mark, dying to tell you their story. They
yeah,
just need you to give them an opening. They just need you to be curious enough to ask, and then they'll tell you. That's why we're writing this book on the power of questions, because one of the things that we found is it works in business, but it also works in personal relationships. Like if you have a teenager at home and that teenager is giving you what we call the Heisman, right? Talk to the hand, right?
right.
The absolute worst thing in the world a parent can do is just go whatever and walk out the door. What they need to do is stand their ground. They need to stand and look at the hand, okay? And ask the holder of the hand, what's going on? Why don't you want to talk to me? How are you feeling? Tell me what's happening with you. That teenager is telling you to talk to the hand because it's a learned behavior, right? They're
Right.
standing in the way of you being able to communicate with them because they think that's the cool thing to do. But what they're really doing is they're crying for help. They're literally crying, desperately crying for you to stand your ground and care more about them than they do about rebelling.
Yeah.
You with me?
I'm
You were a
with you.
teenager once. You know what I'm talking about.
100%.
It's
Yeah.
hard. It's hard to be a
It's
teenager,
hard.
especially
Yeah.
nowadays, right? With social media and all the other stuff. And so
Yeah.
somebody has to reach them. And you don't want social media being the one that reaches them. As a parent, you want to be the one that reaches them because you only have one shot at a relationship with them. and you want to make sure that it's as solid as it can be. So anyway, sorry, we got off on a tangent, but so Indiana University, you graduate. Where do you go from there?
So I went to Australia.
What made you go to Australia?
So my freshman year, I spent a summer with my two roommates from IU, and we spent 5 weeks backpacking through Europe.
Oh, how cool.
And we go to the Heineken brewery in Amsterdam, and we're drinking with this table of Australians traveling around the world, and completely drunk. We make a pact to our three of us. We said, next big trip is we're going to Australia.
Yeah, baby.
Well, my one buddy met a girl. He didn't go, but the two of us kept our pact, and we spent 6 months traveling in Australia.
Well, your buddy missed out.
My buddy missed out.
Yeah,
absolutely. And it was an incredible experience, but it was interesting because after 6 months, I had this incredible job taking tourists out on the Great Barrier Reef. And I loved it. And they wanted me to stay, and they were going to put me up and have me live at the hostel and sell and get people to go on the boat and take them out. And because my visa expired and my buddy was going home, I didn't stay. And then I got a job and started life. And to this day, I still regret it. Like, I wonder how my life would have ended up if I'd stayed in Australia.
Yeah, could have been different. So what was the job that you got when you came back?
So I started working with dentists and helping them buy and sell practices.
Oh, okay.
And so I was the middleman.
Yeah.
And I would help the younger dentists get financing, and I would have the senior dentists value their dental practice and do all the numbers. And it actually worked in Oklahoma. So I had Missouri, Oklahoma, and Kansas as my territory. And I did that for a few years, and this thing called private equity groups started buying up these dental practices, and I'm losing business from this private equity group. What's a private equity group?
Right.
And so I got married, and I moved to Scottsdale, Arizona, which is where I live now. And I just started looking for jobs out here, and I found an investment banking firm that specialized with helping private equity groups do mergers and acquisitions. Like, whoa, I'm a perfect fit.
Yeah.
They already took all my business. I know exactly how this works. So I got hired there, and Mike, I hated it. I had a 45-minute commute to work and back, and I was micromanaged, and it got so bad that I wouldn't get Sunday blues, anticipating Monday coming around, to get the Friday blues, anticipating the weekend going by really fast, and having to be back at work on Monday. So the firm hires this guy, and he's telling me that as a side hustle, he's buying up raw land, pennies on the dollar. He's flipping them online, and he's making a 300% return on his money. And I'm looking at companies all day long, and a great company, has 15% EBITDA margins or free cash flow. Average company's 10%. I'm looking at companies all day long, less than 10%. So coming from the show me state, I don't believe them.
Yeah.
So I've got $3,000 saved up for car repairs. I go to New Mexico. I buy 10 half-acre parcels, an average price of $300 each. I flip them online, and they all sell for an average price of $1,200.
No.
300%. It worked. So I took all that money.
4 times?
Yeah.
Wow.
I went to their auction. And again, it's just 2,000. There's no one in the room. I'm buying up lots and acres for nothing. I sell all that land. I made over $90,000 cash.
Wow.
So I go to my wife, and she's pregnant. I said, honey, I'm going to quit my job, become a full-time land investor. And she said, absolutely not. So I said, okay. So it took 18 months for the land investing income to exceed the investment banking income. And then I quit. And I've been doing it full-time ever since.
Wow. What made you move to Scottsdale?
My wife's parents were snowbirding out here.
Oh.
And I'm looking around. I'm like, oh my gosh, it was March. It was beautiful.
Yeah.
Like, it's just seemed like young and happening. And I didn't love my job. I thought I'll get a job there.
So how'd you meet your wife?
So I was working at a health club.
Yeah.
I was getting free personal training.
Yeah.
So I told the owner of the gym, I said, look, I can help you grow your business. In exchange, you give me free personal training. So he said, deal. So I have to get up at like 4:30 in the morning. I'd get there really early, and I was working out. And he's like, Mark, will you do me a favor and interview a new salesperson? So I interview the salesperson, and I think she's really nice, but I don't think she's great for the job. I said, I'm sorry, I don't think you're right for this job, but do you know any nice girls you can set me up with? And she's like, as a matter of fact, I do. And that's who she set me up with.
So a referral.
A referral. I got a referral.
You met her by a referral.
Yeah.
Way to go.
Yeah.
That's awesome. What a great story. Okay, so you're in Scottsdale and you're buying land. So talk about your first year doing this. So you got to where it exceeded your income in the working for the investment company. So now you've exceeded the income. Now you've quit. Now you're a full-time land investor. So were you buying in Mexico still, or are you buying somewhere else? Where so that $90,000 you made, where was that land located?
Yeah, so that was in Arizona.
Okay.
So I started buying up in Nevada.
Okay.
And I started buying up 640-acre sections and subdividing them into 40-acre parcels.
Okay.
And I was buying them between $30 and $50 an acre and selling them around $500 an acre.
Wow.
And on just that one deal, I made over $5 million.
Wow.
And
Good
so
job.
I was, but money just solves money problems. I didn't solve my time problems. And so every time I flipped for cash, I had cash, and I'd have to pay taxes, and I have to do it again. And so I got a mentor around 2007, and I said, this is a hustle. He's like, Mark, you don't have a business, you have a job. I said, well, how do I make this a business? And so he kind of showed me step by step. Here's how you make this a business.
Okay.
And so and then of course we have the Great Recession, and I learned the hard way.
We hope you enjoyed another episode of the Mike Litton Experience. If you did, do us a favor, smash that subscribe button, tell your friends, family, and coworkers about our program, and wherever you get your podcasts, please leave us a rating. It helps us to connect with quality people just like you.
And that's a wrap. Another episode of the Mike Litton Experience in the books. Reach out to Mike on Instagram at Litton Realty. Want to meet with Mike? Check out calendly.com/Rio760.